great to have such a big crowd here tonight. I'm Corky Marquardt. I'm your host for this evening's event. And on behalf of the St. Joseph Chamber of Commerce and the Community Alliance of St. Joseph, welcome to our first of a four-part series of the Public Service Candidate Leadership Academy. Gosh, we have a great turnout, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being here and for at least considering a role in public office. You know, I don't know if you're thinking about school district or city government or maybe even state government, but the fact that you're here indicates that you have an interest and that you are considering running. So thank you for that. Just a note about me, my day job, I'm the president and CEO of Commerce Bank here in the St. Joseph market. And then I'm involved in a lot of different community activities, but one of them being I'm also the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce this year. So that's why I'm up here in this role tonight. If we could, I'd like to go around the room and just each of you do a brief introduction. Give us your name, where you work, and how long you've been in St. Joe. And Valerie, we don't need to start with you. But Luke, we'll start with you.
Luke Tia. I've been in St. Joe since 1999. And going for city council at large. And I am the CEO of the American Business and Technology University and Training Company, and a couple other little things on the side.
All right.
My name is Jason Esslinger. I'm an attorney. I have my own law firm. It's actually in Kansas City. I grew up here and went to high school here, moved away for about 14 years and moved back 2 years ago. And I'm running for District 3 South End.
My name is Brian Myers. I am from St. Joseph. I graduated high school in Savannah, Missouri in 1996. Moved back to St. Joseph in 2007. My wife Amy and I co-own and operate two businesses downtown. The Lucky Tiger, which has been around 6 years, and Tiger's Den, is a bookstore and bar that's been there about 2.5 years. I'm on the Downtown Review Board and am current president of First Saturdays Downtown St. Joe Inc. And I'm running at large.
My name is Madison Davis. I work at Meyer Hopper Funeral Home. My wife and I moved to St. Joe in 2010, and we've got a 5-year-old son who goes to St. Joe School, and I'm running for District 1, City Council.
Aaron Duncan. I lived in St. Joe 4.5 years. Worked for Principal Financial Group out of my house through their office in Des Moines, and I'm running for school board.
Russell Moore. I'm running for the 5th District, City Council. I work for the City of St. Joseph, and I have for 47 years.
Marty Novak. I am a lifelong St. Joe resident. I work at the News Press. I've worked for MPG for 43 years. I'm running for City Council, District 2.
My name is John Holland. I'm running for District 1. I've been here all my life. Just recently retired, 41 years from Johnson Controls.
I'm Donna Jean Boyer. I'm running for City Council at large. I'm a retired educator. I taught many years at Denton High School.
Yeah.
And I'm currently on the council.
Yeah, I'm Gary Roach. I'm running for 4th District City Council again. I've been on it for 11 plus years. I enjoy doing it. Long time resident of St. Joe. Lived here all my life, so 64 years plus now. So anyway, just thought that it would be a good thing to do again. So
I'm Jane Roach. I'm here to support Gary. I actually work at Park City. I'm the parks manager. Been there for 34 years.
Hi, my name is Brenda Blessing. I've been here since fall of '87. Just recently retired 2 years out from Missouri Western. And I'm running for City Council at large.
Hi, I'm Reba Abear, and I was born and raised in St. Joseph. I moved away for 12 years, lived in Orange County, California, finished my degree in business management from Pepperdine, moved back immediately after I finished, and retired with 31 years from AT&T, and then I worked 10 years at Hilliard Technical Center here in town, and loved that work. Retired about 2 years ago. I currently serve on the St. Joseph Planning Commission. I've been on that for 9 years and currently the chair.
I'm Mary Nelson. I'm running at large. I am a nurse. I've been here since second grade, so not a lifelong resident, but moved from Weston, Missouri. My family moved here. So went through all the grades here and up at Lafayette and Missouri Western, and graduated from there, and Carter Hall, which was the nursing school owned by Methodist. So I was a surgical nurse for 7 or 8 years, had children. Some of you know me as a realtor. I worked in real estate while I was raising my children. Went back and got my RN and did nursing. Now my husband and I are retired or semi-retired. We have 3 children, went through the school districts here, and I worked on a lot of bond issues and so forth there. Done some other volunteer work for the city on committees, and married to a firefighter for 36 years.
Pat Jones, 1st District, 8 years on City Council. And born and raised in St. Joe, and I celebrate my big 75 tomorrow. And I love doing this. You meet so many nice people. Of course, we've always got those that, you know. But it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And like I said, you meet a lot of nice people. And for all of you just new up there, all I can say is be ready to run.
Barbara, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. I'm Barbara Lavass. I'm the current 5th District City Council person. And this has been a real learning experience. I've been doing it for 12 years now. I've met some great people, and some people I've been able to really get some problems solved. Haven't been able to make everyone happy, but I think the thing that I really enjoy most about the job is just working with individual citizens and people that have not been listened to, and trying to help them.
Okay, starting down.
I'm Rusty Summers. I'm going for at large. I own a tanning salon on St. Joe Avenue. Born and raised in St. Joe. We have an activist group that helps the city with certain things. We sit on boards for the city as well, or committees. I don't know what else to say. That's it. Travis.
Travis Smith. I'm running for mayor. I'm born and raised in St. Joe, and I'm an engineering graduate from Missouri Western. I worked for several years at Sara Lee Foods, now Tyson Foods, as an engineer until my accident in 2008. And I own my own business out of my home now, aftermarket car parts and things like that. But two little boys, so full-time dad pretty much. I'm sure if anybody's got kids, they know what I'm talking about there. But I'm really excited about a chance to hopefully get in here and make some changes in the city for the better. Thank you.
My name is Virginia Wiggum. I'm running in the 4th District. I want to see some changes at City Hall. I have been a political activist ever since the 70s, 80s, and I most recently was coordinator of the Tea Party, and now my husband has taken that over.
Okay. We missed you.
Dennis Adams. I've lived in St. Joe all my life. Adams Jewelry. I started that business here. I just like to see it a better place to live. I think I have ideas we could make some changes for the better.
Okay, thank you. Did I miss anybody else going around the room? All right. Well, so why we're here tonight and for the 3 sessions following this, we have several objectives. The first is to inform potential candidates of leadership duties and responsibilities, to share regulations pertaining to serving in an elected position, to learn about critical challenges and opportunities in our community, and finally, to explore operational aspects of the school district and the city of St. Joseph. So before we move forward, I want to introduce Pat Lilly, President and CEO of the Chamber. Say hi, Pat. Hi. And Steve Johnston, the Director of the Community Alliance of St. Joseph. And if you have any needs or need more information, once we get along in this process, give Pat or Steve a call. They're always happy to help. Steve, you want to talk about the next sessions?
Yes, thank you very much, Corky. In front of you is the schedule for the 4-part session, so it's a front and back piece, if you will. So the next session will be 1 week from this evening. And we have someone that many of you are familiar with, Barry Burr from KFEQ, who will be talking about working with the media. And then also we have 2 folks coming from the Missouri Ethics Commission out of Jefferson City. You'll note that the timeline has been extended from 6 to 8:30 because oftentimes folks have questions or want to stay a little bit later and talk to those folks from the Missouri Ethics Commissions about any specific things you might have. The 3rd session is going to be held out at Missouri Western State University. You'll have an opportunity to continue to hear from community leaders in terms of partnerships and collaborations and things like that. And then the 4th and final session, if you're a candidate for the St. Joseph School District, you'll be meeting at the school district offices, and they will share a lot of details about budgeting and finance and conducting meetings and things like that. If you're a candidate for mayor or city council, that session will be held at Remington Nature Center. So please note that on the schedule. The 3rd meeting at Missouri Western and the 4th meeting either at the school district offices or at Remington Nature Center. Thanks, Corky.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, 2 quick housekeeping items. The restrooms are located out the double doors and to your left. And there are drinks and some snacks up here, so feel free to help yourself. And finally, you'll see during some of the sessions that it is being videotaped. So that's because the school district filing has not yet started. So by videotaping it, we have the information available to candidates that decide late in the game to file. So just so that you know that. And then there will be time after each speaker for questions. So feel free to write those down and ask them because I'm sure other people will have the same question, but we want all questions to be answered. Okay, so our first speaker is Dave Lichty. He's going to talk about the expectations of an elected official. Dave's a native of St. Joseph and attended Central High School. He graduated from the University of Missouri in Columbia with a BS in business and an MS in accounting. Go Tigers. His career began with Arthur Anderson and Company, and in 1988 he started his own CPA firm, which has now evolved into the current firm of Lichty, Franken & Young, LLC, where Dave is the managing partner. The firm's dedication has 3 underlying principles: professionalism, responsiveness, and quality. And David, through his public service, has shown his passion for education. He's served on our local school board for 6 years. He has served on the State Board of Education, appointed by Governor Holden. He served on the Governor's P20 Council while on the state board, and he's currently serving on Missouri Western Board of Governors. He was appointed by Governor Nixon there. Please welcome Dave Lichty.
So, welcome. Steve called and said, we'd like you to speak at this forum. And I did, like, probably 12 years ago. And it was pretty close to when I had run for school board. And anyway, and so I ran for school board in '94. Anyway, I hear something. Anyway.
Trying to shut my phone down.
Oh, okay. So anyway, so I ran for school board in '94 and served a 6-year term there. And I can remember when I actually signed up to run, it was kind of a moment when I had, young kids in school. We'd had a death in our family, and I'd been active over at Gene Field a little bit with my wife through the PTA. And so I decided, I'm going to do this. I've never run for anything in my life. I'm going to try it. And so I threw my name in the hat. I didn't have to deal with social media or any of that baloney, which is out there now. I just ran, a campaign, put some signs in the yard. But I'll never forget, Mr. Tarpley, Bill Tarpley, was on the school board. He had been assistant principal at Central High School. And Mr. Tarpley knew me from high school. And so I was probably, I was 35 years old at the time. And Mr. Tarpley called me and he said, I'd really like to talk to you about why you're running. I said, okay. He goes, let's come out to my house. His wife had passed away not that long ago, and we went out there, and I sat on his sofa, I'll never forget, and he pours us both a 7-Up, and we're sitting there, and he goes, people run for something. There's one of 3 reasons people run for things. And I go, okay. He goes, one is, you got an axe to grind. You got an agenda, And he says, that's one reason people run. And I go, okay. He goes, number 2, he says, you got a big ego. You just want to be out there, you want. And number three is you want to do something positive for the school in this case, or the community if it's city council. And he looks at me and he goes, I sure hope you're number 3, is what he says. And he really meant it. He really, really meant it from his heart because, I told Steve when I walked in, I said, he asked me to do this, and I said, gosh, Steve, I have only run once in my life. It was '94. It's been a long time ago. He goes, yeah, but you can kind of reflect back on what it's done, what it's done for you, kind of. I'm going to say, so where I'm going with that is, so I did run for number 3. I didn't have an axe to grind. I probably have an ego, but I didn't think that was the reason I was running. And the third reason was I had kids in school and I cared. So I tried to conduct myself as being an elected official. I was scared to death. I won, and I was scared running. I didn't like the media. It made me nervous. I didn't want to make stupid mistakes or have my parents read something that sounded goofy. I was nervous about running. I really was. And then they had debates, or we'd go before the PTA council, and they had all these different forums, and But I got elected. I just did 1 6-year term. Was very proud of the work we did from '94 to 2000. And I felt like the entire time I had to keep focused on what I was expected to do. And it wasn't about me. It really was not about me now. It was about trying to conduct myself in a professional manner, to do the right job, to be the right person, and to conduct myself that way. That's what I thought was expected of me. And it took a little bit of time to get there and to learn that. I will promise you one thing. Every board I've been on, if you're on this side of the fence looking at it, and I'll give you a great example. When I was on the local school board, we always complained about the Department of Education down in Jeff City. We complained all the time about how DESE's trying to make us do this and DESE's doing that. Well then, out of nowhere, I got appointed to be on the State Board of Education. Now I'm part of DESE, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, once you get on this side of the fence, you see there's a whole different story there. So I will make a couple comments. I think one reason why I got appointed to the State Board of Education, and then after that I got appointed to Missouri Western's Board of Governors, both governor appointed, had nothing to do about my political contributions or my political affiliations, had zero to do with that. It had nothing, because I didn't give any money to Holden or to Nixon's campaigns. I was not I was not a person that they were paying back for some reason. I always have looked back on that and I thought I tried to do the right thing when I was an elected official and tried not to have my own agenda, but to have the proper agenda for the school district. And so as I look at it, and I've gotten older and I look back and kind of see what I've done, and because I was 6 years on the local board, then 8 years on the state board, and then now currently in about my third year serving on the Missouri Western board, I hope that my service in that first 6 years, if I had done something other than doing it the best I could, would have probably not bear the fruit of being able to do the other things that I've done. So I think expectations, that's what I think I'm supposed to be talking about, is expectations of an elected official. Since it was a while ago, I'm going to say the bottom line is do the right thing. You know, do it for the right reason and do the right thing, what you're being elected to do. So that's about really all I have. I didn't prepare a big long speech. I just reflected a little bit, and I would entertain any questions that you might want to throw my way. Having none, so you know. No, any questions? I mean, seriously, because it's been a while since I've run, but that's how I look at it. Yes,
Hey,
Mr.
What do you think your biggest challenge was throughout that whole process?
Driving to Jeff City once a month and spending the night. No, you know, when I was doing that, especially, I'm a CPA by trade, and so during tax season, I mean, once a month we drove to Jeff City, and so this is the middle of my busy time, and you still make the trip, and you're spending the night and have these long meetings, and that was challenging. But it was also very rewarding. You know, the things that are challenging often become the things you look back and say, that was so rewarding. I will echo what I heard from several of our council members say, which is absolutely by far the truth, is the relationships and the people that I have met through these different things that I've been involved in has fulfilled my life in a lot of ways. It really has. I mean, great people, just really good people. And of course, you've always got the ones, but for the most part, I mean, great relationships, great people. Those when you look backwards, but challenges, I will tell you there were some real economic and political challenges with the State Board of Education that happened when I was there. That's when they had, well, first of all, No Child Left Behind was there, and then they had Race to the Top, and they had all the Common Core Standard things. You had all this stuff that was going on, and money, and I mean, all the way from Washington, D.C. down to Jeff City were impacting what the governor's office was then pushing to us, and it's like, wait a second, we're just trying to educate kids, you know? I mean, so that probably, I've got another really quick story. One day, the state legislative groups, like a little committee, had us over there, and we all went over to have lunch, and they start talking about something, and I walk out of there with the commissioner of education, and I go, I don't understand one thing that they were talking about. I don't even understand what is they're trying to do. He said, hate to tell you this, but follow the money. I go, what do you mean? I go, what do you mean? And he said, no, he goes, this guy is tied to this guy, whose biggest supporter is this guy, and this guy does this, and it's all connected. He says, that's what it's all about. I mean, I literally walked out there like, I don't get this. I mean, I don't even understand it. But so there were I got involved in some of that. It wasn't all the time, but at times that weird stuff would pop up, you know, and you go, oh my gosh. So I was somewhat naive, I guess, to some of those things. But so I think the economic times when they were down and the challenges of having to deal with the fact that the federal government held a lot of purse strings back then, and we're kind of playing a little bit with the states. At least that's how we looked at it at the state board level. Was probably one of the biggest challenges I had to deal with at the time. So, anything else? If not, thank you. Good luck. You bet.
All right. So our next speaker is Pat Conway, and he's going to talk about what it means to be a candidate. Pat's lived in St. Joseph his entire life. He entered public office in 1983, serving as the county clerk for Buchanan County. He quickly gained the respect of county officials through the entire state, And in 2010, Pat was elected to the Missouri House of Representatives in the 10th District, where he continues to serve today. Pat and his wife Mary live downtown in St. Joseph and are true patrons of the community. Having been a longtime friend of Pat Conway's, I know firsthand that he has made, as Dave said, many friends across the country, and having traveled with Pat, I've benefited from those friendships and some of our travels. So Pat's a lifelong community servant, and so please join me in welcoming Pat Conway.
Thank you, and of course, welcome. It's a pivotal time for anyone who decides they're going to cross that, what I refer to as the thin line, that you are leaving the friendly neighborhood of private citizen and crossing that line and becoming a public official. And although it's an imaginary line and you don't see it, it's not defined really well, it's a very big step. So I wish all of you well. Corky gave me some very nice flattering words. I guess I'll give you a little more detail that I was born and raised here. I grew up on Edmund Street, not far from what I like to tell Dr. Vardabedian is one of the old Cronkite homes on 15th Street. I went to school here. Pat and I, Pat likes to tell everyone that I graduated from Lafayette, and when you're at the Northside Festival and Pat says you graduated from Lafayette, you don't deny it, but actually I went to Christian Brothers and graduated from there. From Christian Brothers I went down and went to junior college and did 2 years at junior college. I liked it so well I decided to do a third. At that time, there was a lady down at the post office named Helen Rosler who was in charge of the draft board, and Helen clarified to me in very abrupt terms that there was no such thing at graduate school at St. Joseph Junior College, so I'm letting you know here and there that you're drafted. So prior to 2001, on September 11th, but September 11th, 1968, I went down to 7th and Edmond and was drafted and inducted into the Army. Spent 20 months and 20 days, not that I was counting. Did a tour in Vietnam with the 25th Infantry Division and was fortunate enough to come back. And by that time, some of the big political people of those days who were really my mentors, guys like Senator John Downs and Representative Ronnie Reed, and people had the forethought and the goodwill and the political connections to develop the beautiful campus we have out on Downs Drive that allowed me to come back, and through the generosity of the taxpayers and the GI Bill, I was able to go back and take as much time as I possibly could to graduate from Missouri Western, because in those days, if you were going to a college, we weren't quite yet a university, but if you're going to a college, you were you couldn't get the GI Bill once you graduated. So I managed to accumulate almost 180 hours of credit without actually having to obtain a baccalaureate degree. So I got another 3 years in on my GI Bill before I graduated. I went to work then. The very first job I had offered was with the Missouri Division of Employment Security. I worked down at 7th and Charles Street for about 8 years. And I was at that time a research analyst. I got a little experience that helped me in the political world by doing the television interviews for labor statistics, the unemployment rate, and things of that nature. The bad part was that the unemployment rate was going up dramatically. There was a lot of things economically that in the early 70s, late 70s and the early 80s were occurring, so I got laid off. The boss came to me and said, your choices are to go to Jefferson City or you're going to have to find another job. And it was the spring of 1982. some people had come to me and asked me if I would consider running for county clerk in Buchanan County. Sidney Johnson, who later became a senator, and not only the senator, but the presiding judge, or then the presiding commissioner, and I ran in 1982. We did not even know each other when we filed, but in those days, everything at the county level, and to speak of at the city level, after they went from partisan to nonpartisan politics, there was not a Republican elected official in the courthouse. Judge Jackson, who was a Republican, who my wife worked for 25 years, so we had a very politically diverse conversations between her, me, and her boss. But that's just to show you how things can so dramatically change in politics. So I guess from that perspective, I'm probably, without going into the specifics, the longest serving person in elected office in the county since my first election was in '82. I've ran 10 times in November. I did 27 years as county clerk, and I'm just now finishing my last term, which will be my 9th year next year as state representative for the 10th district, and as a result of term limits, that era will be gone. Politics is a very, very interesting and a very, very definitive vocation. And one of the things you need to know specifically, and I'm going to say it right now, because when the Dodgers went and played their World Series game, they brought Vin Scully out to throw out the first pitch. So I feel like Pat and Steve and Corky have brought the old timer out to discuss politics. And the one thing you want to know is you don't want to be the one at the podium when the first pitch of the World Series occurs, and that's going to happen pretty quickly. So I'm going to do a Dave Lichty and try to get my remarks over as quickly as possible. Let me tell you a quick story, and this is one thing that that I always remembered in politics. And in this era of Facebook, social messaging, Twitter, and everything else, well, long before any of that, and I know Marty knows the substance of this story, but about my first full year in office, we were gearing up for an election. And in those days, there was a reporter at the News Press named Norman Stewart. Norman Stewart was a crusty old reporter, and I was kind of the young kid, and Norman had a special relationship between my predecessor, who I actually beat in the primary election by 163 votes out of almost 30,000, so I know what a close election is. And in those days, the journalists took a little bit more liberties than I think they do now. There was quite a colorful group of journalists who worked for the news press, but Norman was probably by far one of the most colorful. Well, Norman wrote a story, and in the story he quoted me with some remarks that I didn't think were quite fitting, mainly because Norman didn't even ask me. He didn't talk to me, so it was hard for him to quote me. And so Norman wrote this story, and I read it. And I'm going, well, this isn't right. This isn't good. I don't like the way this is slanted. So I may have had a couple cocktails. And later that evening, about 7 o'clock, 7:30, I decided I'd just call Norman at home. So I called Norman, and I started to tell Norman, I said, Norman, that article you wrote in this evening's paper, that article you wrote, inaccurate. It's not right. It's not. And all of a sudden I hear this, whoa, 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 whoa. And he just keeps going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Son, let me tell you something. I said, yeah. He says, I like to have a drink every now and then myself. He says, and I like to talk politics. He says, I don't do them at the same time, and he hung up on me. And to this day, whenever I want to make a comment on something that happened politically, I go back to that night. And I think about that night, and I go, let's wait till tomorrow. And 99% of the time, it's not nearly as important tomorrow as it was last night. So I keep with me the June the 30th, 1988. No, this is not the article, but this is one thing I want to tell you about politics, especially local politics. This is the Thursday, June the 30th, 1988, St. Joseph News Press. This is the last edition of the evening St. Joseph newspaper. Now, the fact that it says Nicus and Conway lead the Hi-Ho to a baseball slow pitch victory was another reason to keep it. But if you think politics are tough now, when you had two newspapers competing out of the same building who would question you and want to develop a story, get mad when the other edition got the story, and you had Norm Stewart and Gary Chilcote and reporters who had been with both newspapers fighting drastically for that story, telling you not to let it out that night, that was some pretty tough politics. So to be a candidate today, you have to do so many different things that we didn't have to do. I'm not sure I could do a campaign today like we did in 1982. In the day now when you are doing everything via social media, you're doing everything by Twitter. I don't do Twitter. I don't trust myself. I'm afraid if I did Twitter, I would do the same thing I did when I called Norman at 7 o'clock at night, so I just don't do it. But all the young candidates do. I look at the young candidates running for the state house seat as they're coming up, looking at the wealth of information that's out there for candidates and what they can develop. I mean, they have systems now where they would give me when I had opposition in the state house, and you know, that has the van system where you're going down the street and you know the name of the individual in that house. You know the last time they voted. You know the number of times that they voted. You know that whether they're leaning to be a Democrat or leaning to be a Republican. You know to a certain extent what issues are important to them. So that if you go door to door and knock on their door, you are going to have a pretty good idea of whether that person's going to be receptive to you or whether that person is going to probably be unacceptable to you or you're going to be unacceptable to them. So the diversity of the information out there and everything that's out there before you now is completely different. I will say just a couple of things. I like what David said. Being a Vietnam veteran, I've always kind of studied the war. And I've got a couple of favorite things that happened that I have read and relate to. And there's a tremendous picture of Lyndon Johnson sitting at his cabinet table all by himself. I've actually tried to get it, but I think the copyright is still in existence by the gentleman who was doing the photography. And Lyndon Johnson sitting there without a jacket on, no one else around besides him and the photographer, and his head is laying down on the table. And the quote that he offered with that photograph, which is very meaningful, he goes, "Doing the right thing is not difficult. Knowing what the right thing is the hard part." And I think if you take that quotation as you go through your public office, you'll certainly know a little bit more about when the criticism comes, and the thin line between debate and criticism can often be overshadowed by the emotions that you put into it. So believe me, when you're out there and you become that public official, and some of the things that come up are a little bit more difficult to accept, that you're taking on a personal basis, don't always take it that way. Because too often you as the candidate or you as the person in office puts a perception to things that really isn't there. The number one thing I would offer is have a good support base. Make sure that you have people that you can bounce ideas off of, whether it relates to the campaign or relates to the issues, that will be frank, honest, and give you a good response. Virginia and I have had discussions for years. We don't agree on a lot of things. We have agreed on some things, but we have the respect of each other to allow us to communicate those beliefs and not take it personally. And that's probably the most difficult thing you can do. I'm going to wrap up with a quote that I'll go back to one of my newspaper friends who was one of my best advisors. It was Bob Slater's dad, Harold, who, you know, all of us go through life, whether it be public or personal, you have your highs and your lows. Harold came to me one time and he brought me, and I've still got it framed, it's in my office in Jefferson City. And Harold was one of the more remarkable men that I ever met, friend of Harry Truman, played poker with him, knew all of the people who in the 40s, 50s, and 60s shaped the future of Missouri. Harold says, I know things are a little rough for you and the clouds are a little dark, but here's a gift for you and I want you to have it. And it's in a small gold frame, and it's a quote from Edward Everett. Everett was a politician, a Whig back in the mid-1800s, who was not only known for some political things, but he was probably one of the better orators of this time. Take this to heart, and if you want a copy of it, I'd be glad to give it to you, because I've looked at it hundreds and hundreds of times and during the 36 years that I've been in public office. And the quote is, a young man asked Edward Everett, who thought he had been slandered. He says, what should you do? And Everett said, do nothing. Half the people who bought the paper never saw the article. Half of those who saw it did not read it. Half of those who read it did not understand it. Half of those who understood it did not believe it. And half of those who believed it are of no account anyway. So bear that in mind when you're in public office. It's always something good to go by. So thank you very much. And
you know, he's leaving office, and we might not get this time again. You know, we talk about near and dear friends. Dr. Newhart, this poor guy, I can't tell you how many trips the students from Pershing School made to Jefferson City, and thanks to them and him, they got the state exercise. And when we got down there, we get on the elevator, we could see Pat doing the jumping jacks, but we owe a lot to him.
I got 9 years in the House and I've got one bill. That's part of being in the minority.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Our next speaker, Dr. Robert Vartabedian, is going to talk about developing personal leadership skills. Dr. Vartabedian has served as president of Missouri Western State University for nearly 10 years. I can't believe it's been that long. He notes, it is very gratifying to be involved in enhancing the lives of our students and our community. Just this fall, Missouri Western welcomed over 1,000 new freshmen to our campus to begin their careers at Missouri Western. This reflects a 16% growth over the fall 2016 semester, all while keeping a high standard of academic excellence. With the increasingly effective retention efforts of our faculty and staff, this large freshman class should set into motion positive enrollment growth for the future. Another area of growth for Missouri Western is our new degree programs that meet community needs. The new Master of Business Administration program is a natural extension of the excellent Craig School of Business and already has over 45 new graduate students enrolling. We also have created 2 new options for our Associate in Manufacturing Engineering Technology program and Precision Machining and Instrumentation and Automation. Since Dr. Vartabedian began his presidency at Missouri Western, he has made a concerted effort to renew, renovate, and expand the campus to meet the needs of today's students. And if you haven't been out there in a while, it is awesome. With thanks to the state legislator and private donors, they have been able to complete 9 new construction projects and 8 major building renovations since 2009. We are fortunate to have Dr. Vartabedian sharing his insight on leadership.
I have someone to assist me with my PowerPoint slides. So, yeah, is that where you operate it from? Okay. Yeah, this may be a first. Many of you probably know our very own Joseph Kellogg. Joseph actually is one of my bosses. He's on the student board of governors, so this may be the first time in history that someone's boss is running the PowerPoint slides. So thank you, Joseph, for being here tonight to run my PowerPoint slides. Now, I'm very pleased to be here. I've done this before, and this is by far the biggest crowd we've ever had, so this is really a very nice gathering for, I think, some important information. And specifically, I'm to address developing delivery skills, and believe me, I have no easy answers. I'm honored to be able to speak about that, but believe me, I do not have all the answers. I have some suggestions that I will make to you as you further develop your leadership skills, and I'm sure in many cases you've developed those leadership skills quite well. I'm learning things every day, and I've been in higher education now almost as long as Brenda, 40 years now. And every day I learn something new about leadership and the importance of leadership. And so the way I've decided to focus my presentation is around some inspirational quotes by people I consider to be inspirational leaders. I would like to preface my comments with my appreciation, as others have expressed to you, for your ability or your willingness to get involved in public service, or I know in some cases you're considering getting involved in public service. That is commendable really in and of itself, and I assume, as others have talked about this evening, that your reasons for doing that are honorable reasons, such as giving back to your community or improving your community. So I think by doing that, or by believing that and following through on your wish to become a public servant, you've followed the very high standard set by a person who's very famous in public education, American public education, a man by the name of Horace Mann. And Horace Mann has a great quote, and it's one of the several quotes I'll be using tonight. And his quote is, "Be ashamed to die until you have won a victory for humanity." And I would say the mere act of putting yourself out there, or even considering putting yourself out there, believe me, there are many people who would never do what you're doing or consider what you're doing. I think you've already won a victory for humanity. So with that said, I'll give you 3 key words that I believe, in my opinion, are the essence of leadership. And if you remember nothing else from my presentation, perhaps you'll remember these 3 key words. And interestingly enough, there's been some overlap in the previous presentations in terms of some of the things that we believe in. And the 3 key words that I've seen through the years, at least 40 years in public higher education, are ideas, the importance of good ideas, the importance of obviously integrity, and then finally the importance of responsiveness. So I'll just quickly look at these, oftentimes through inspirational quotes that demonstrate them. Certainly, a very, very important part of leadership is generating good ideas and then acting upon those good ideas. And I'm sure that's what you're all about. You have some good ideas and you'd like to act upon them to better our community. Well, one of my favorite John Kennedy quotes is one that people probably aren't that familiar with, but that quote is, "We need people who can dream things that never were." In other words, become visionary leaders with visionary ideas. Well, how do we get those visionary ideas if we already don't have those visionary ideas? I used to teach an entire course when I was in Texas on the art of creativity, and the entire course was based upon enhancing creativity and overcoming obstacles to creativity. So I've thought a little bit about this over the years, and certainly a good starting point for getting good ideas or getting additional good ideas would be to create an environment that encourages open expression of ideas. One way of not promoting good ideas is to create an environment that just does the opposite, that you jump down people's throats who offer their opinions. And so that process certainly is a good starting point for generating good ideas. Certainly, and I think Pat and Dave Lichty alluded to this, seeking out creative, non-judgmental people to advise you. And then I guess finally, in terms of generating ideas, setting an example yourself by being all of these things and lead by example. Well, integrity is another component, I think, of leadership. And you can have all the great ideas in the world, but that's not enough for a true public servant. You have to have integrity. And if I were to prioritize the three things that I'm talking about, although I don't have them in that order, the one that you have to have is integrity. A true public leader or a true public servant has unquestionable integrity or public trust. And if that public trust is violated, as we know, even through some of the things going on here locally, you simply cannot lead. And there's a great quote that I use often from an old movie that's recently, I guess, been redone for Broadway called American in Paris. It goes all the way back to 1951. And that quote was, "Americans expect their leaders to be elected by the people, but not act like the people." It was an observation made by a Frenchman. The ideal public servant, and I emphasize ideal, the ideal public servant is held to a higher standard than a non-public servant. And I emphasize, generally speaking, because certainly in today's political climate, there are some exceptions to that. And I probably could give an entire presentation on the counter-argument to those kinds of expectations. Someone certainly who had very high expectations of himself and set the standard, I think, for being a public official with high, unquestionable integrity would be our native son, President Harry Truman. When Truman left office, and some of you may know this story already, he refused to be hired for pay. He just absolutely refused to be hired for pay. And Truman was not a wealthy man. He certainly could have used the extra money, but he would not be hired for pay. And his famous comment was, "They were wanting to hire the President of the United States, not me, and the President of the United States is not for sale." That's the kind of man Harry S. Truman was. Certainly set a standard for integrity and leadership. Another quote that I just stumbled upon in the local newspaper was from our own state senator, former state senator and state representative, Glenn Klippenstein. I think he made a very telling comment about integrity and leadership. And Glenn Klippenstein's comment was, "A great leader doesn't want to be somebody, he wants to do something." That could be he or she, I suppose. What's important about that is that a great leader just doesn't sit around savoring the title or the influence. A great leader gets some things done. And I sense from going around the room that you certainly are potentially that great leader. I can't talk about integrity without talking about our another beloved native son, the most trusted man in America for a number of years, our native son, Walter Cronkite. As you know, for many years, he was known as the most trusted man in America. And Cronkite was never a public official. There were some rumors in 1976, and as he was winding down his career in 1980, that he would run for the vice presidency on an independent ticket, but he was never a public figure. Yet he was still looked upon as the most credible man in America against presidents and other public figures. Well, how did Cronkite accomplish this as we talk about integrity? Well, Cronkite took pride, and I know this having taught a course on Walter Cronkite and having met just about all of his surviving family members, he took a great deal of pride in being an objective voice during some of the most pivotal moments in American history, particularly in the 20th century and early 21st century. His nephew, a guy named Doc Murray, actually his great-nephew, asked me to give him a tour of the Cronkite Memorial. It's about a year ago. And he said, "You know, Bob, Uncle Walter and I spent just about all of our holidays together. And I never knew until after he retired where he was coming from politically. None of us knew, none of the relatives knew if he was liberal or conservative or somewhere in the middle. We had no idea, because that's the way Uncle Walter was until after he retired, and then we realized what his political leanings were." He was very good, Walter Cronkite was very good at his job. And people probably don't realize before he became anchor of the CBS Evening News in 1962, he had about 30 years of experience in journalism, mostly in print journalism, before he became that famous anchor for nearly 20 years with CBS. He worked as a newspaper boy. He worked on his junior high school newspaper, his high school newspaper. For the first couple of years before he dropped out of University of Texas, he was on their college newspaper, was a war correspondent, and really had 30 years under his belt before he became the anchor of the CBS News, which is what we probably mostly know him about. He wasn't just an attractive talking head. He was someone who really knew what he was doing. And then finally, in terms of using Walter Cronkite as an example of integrity, I think that we all should look at, he spoke from the heart. I've studied a number of people in my career, and in many cases, the more you study them, the more you see their flaws. I would have to say in the case of Walter Cronkite, quite the opposite. The more I study him, the more I admire him. And I think he serves as a great example for all of us in terms of integrity and in terms of being an objective voice of reason. And I hope you've all had a chance to see the memorial that we have. We have the only museum in the world dedicated to the most influential journalist of the 20th century, Walter Cronkite, and we're very proud to have it on our campus. Finally is the notion of responsiveness. I mean, it would be great if you just needed ideas and you needed integrity, but that's really not enough. You need to be responsive to your constituents. I'll never forget, it was 30 years ago, about the time that Brenda started working at Missouri Western. I had my first noteworthy administrative appointment. I was teaching at Wichita State at the time, and at a relatively young age, I interviewed for a job there and became the assistant dean of graduate studies. And I remember I was very pleased with myself, and I called my father up and told my dad, my late father, Dad, just became the assistant dean in my early 30s at Wichita State University. Just thought you'd be the first person that I would tell. And there was just kind of silence on the other end of the phone. From California, and I was calling from Wichita, Kansas. And then the only thing he said to me was, please return your phone calls. Always return your phone calls. And I didn't, at the moment I thought, I guess, he didn't go to college, so maybe he didn't understand that this was kind of a big deal, and what's this thing about phone calls? And then the more I experienced administration, the more I realized what he was talking about. He was talking about being responsive to your constituents, whoever those constituents might be. And I know many of you are very busy, and if you successfully achieve the office that you're seeking, it's probably not possible to return every phone call, but certainly you can make sure that somebody returns that phone call, that you are responsive to your constituents. And sometimes this is referred to, and some of you who've already been in an elective office know this very, very well, refer to it as constituent service. Very important aspect of public service, that you are responsible and responsive to your constituents. Related to being responsive to your constituents is a whole new dimension that we now have that we didn't have when I first started out as an administrator 30 years ago. You have to be responsive, but you also have to be responsive in terms of making what we call correct communication choices, or use the appropriate communication channel. Today, unlike in my day, it's not enough to be responsive. You have to be responsive, but appropriately so. When I first started out 30 years ago as an administrator, I basically had three choices in being responsive to my constituents, above and beyond having somebody else be responsive to them. I could talk to them face to face, I could call them, or I can write them a letter. Now you have just this massive array of communication choices, as others have alluded to, in terms of social media, email, text messages, tweets, you name it. And whenever I talk about responsiveness, I always say, well, there's an added dimension to responsiveness these days, and that is the appropriateness of your responsiveness. And again, we probably could have a whole discussion on tweeting, and that is a responsive kind of response to your constituents, a timely, responsive way of communicating with your constituents, but it doesn't meet perhaps the second part of that test in terms of it being appropriate. So I would encourage you not only to be responsive, but to be appropriately responsive to your constituents. Being just responsive is probably not enough in contemporary society. Well, I'm running out of my allotted time, but I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate being able to chat with you a little bit about, leadership and moving into leadership positions if you are new to leadership positions, and the whole notion of the importance or the sanctity of ideas, integrity, and responsiveness. And believe me, you're doing something that I have never done. I've never sought public office, so I greatly appreciate what you're doing. And even though I haven't sought public office, I've been in a leadership role to know that sometimes things don't go right and there are miscues and there are mistakes along the way, but that's to be expected. And I just would like to close with a quote from my favorite playwright, George Bernard Shaw, and he once said the following: "A life spent making mistakes is not only more honorable, but more useful than a life spent doing nothing." Thank you all very much for doing something. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr.
Glad to answer any
Barbadian?
questions. Yes.
Doctor, I don't have a question, but I want to thank you for what you did with extending the manufacturing engineering program. That's what I took. I was the actual second graduating class out of there.
Oh, my goodness.
And that is one amazing program that you guys offer. I was the first engineer in Sara Lee Foods in St. Joseph, now Tyson Foods, that had went through that program. And after they had experience with me as an engineer is when they opened up the door for employees to come over and take college courses in that program on account of the company. That's how impressed they were with that program.
Yeah, that's true.
That is an amazing hands-on. I don't think, unless you take it or you go out there, you have the best instructors. I don't think you could get any better of an instructor. Professor Yang, I do believe, is now over the engineering
He's the
board.
department chair.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I will
He is
make
amazing.
sure and convey that to them. It's one of our largest undergraduate programs, and with these two new options, it'll get even larger. So thank you very much.
I've never, I still have in my cell phone today the instructors that worked with me that I communicate with regularly on,
Well, that's great.
They're great people, and I thank you for your work to extend that
you're very
program.
welcome.
It's a very
I'm glad it's worked out well for you. Thank you. Anything else? Well, thank you all very much. Joseph, thank you for your assistance. Thank you.
Okay, to round out our agenda tonight, we wanted to talk about something extremely important to our community, and that's partnerships. Collaboration is simply imperative if we are to move forward as a community. Pat Lilly came to St. Joseph from Texas as city manager in 1990. After 6 successful years there, he then became the president and CEO of the St. Joseph Area Chamber of Commerce. Pat then moved to the private sector, and in 2006, he was appointed the Chief Administrative Officer for Triumph Foods. We are fortunate that the Chamber Board of Directors, and I've said this since I became the chairman, Pat, you can't leave until my stint is over. But we were able to lure him back for a second tenure as president and CEO of the St. Joseph Chamber. His wealth of experience in recruiting and retaining business, growth, and expansion lends well to our topic on partnerships. So please welcome Pat Lilly.
Thank you, Corky. Well, Corky's tenure ends here in a couple of months, so I think I'll be here at least that long. So I think she's safe on that score. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I've had the pleasure and honor, frankly, of working with public officials most of my career. I graduated with a political science degree. Thought I knew what I wanted to do. Joined the Foreign Service and figured out, no, that's not really what I wanted to do. So I ended up going into public administration. And so I have I've had a long career, a very rewarding career, and working with public officials, some of whom are in this room tonight, and some of you that hope to be in those positions in the future. And I really mean this. It is with a great deal of respect that I welcome you here tonight, because running for public office these days is not for the faint of heart. And I appreciate people who are willing to step up and do that, but most importantly, willing to take on the role as a leader in your community. It's not a role that oftentimes gets recognized enough, certainly never rewarded appropriately, and oftentimes can be challenging both for you and those around you. So again, as a resident of St. Joseph's, I certainly appreciate it. I see we have Bruce Woody here tonight. Now, you know, Bruce Woody and I go back quite a ways. I actually hired Bruce Woody. I'll take credit for that in this group. There are a few groups that I say I don't know who that guy is, but I had hired Bruce many years ago as the Assistant Public Works Director. So he and I go back quite a ways. And you know, there used to be an old joke in the city management business. You never wanted to follow a city manager who ended up living in your community, because city managers have big egos and they always think they know best. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Woody has 3 of us that live in the community. He has me, he has Stet Shanzi, and he has Vince Capel now. So, you know, sympathize with poor Bruce, because he's got all these egos now living in the community that all think they know how best to run the city. But we really enjoy working with Bruce and his staff, and it's an important part of what we do. You know, one story I would share with you, and maybe this will put a little bit of perspective. You know, as you think about partnership and collaboration, for those of you who are running for city council or mayor, you know, that's also an important part of working with the city staff. It's very important to have a partnership with the staff and the city manager in order to get things done. And, you know, when I came to the city many years ago, I was the 5th city manager in 9 years. Now think about that, the 5th city manager in 9 years. That means the average tenure for the city manager before I came was less than 2 years. And I think there were actually, by the time you counted the city managers and the acting city managers, there were probably 10 of them during that period of time. And you know, one of the things that I really respected about the council that hired me, and I can tell you they didn't always get along, but they were some great people, is that they understood that in order to get things done as a city council, they had to have a staff and city manager that could help them get to a point of making those decisions. They had to have a partnership that allowed them to get information, to understand information, and provide them the kind of information they needed to make decisions. And so I think in that respect, I would have to say that while I certainly enjoyed my tenure as city manager, what I really appreciated was how the city council came together with the staff to form an effective team to make decisions. Because at the end of the day, that's what you're there to do. You're there to make decisions, and that does take a partnership and collaboration with your staff. But one of my funnier stories, you know, St. Joe didn't have a long history with city managers. As I said, I was, you know, one of probably the guy that's going to be here less than 2 years, and I'd be gone too. But I had my first review with the city council. Now, the city council had never done a review of a city manager before, because frankly, they never stayed long enough to get a review. Or maybe that was the review, you're gone. And so there was some consternation about that. Well, now how do we do that? Well, Glenda Kelly, who I always had a great deal of respect for, a very smart lady, but pretty tough to work for, which I respected. And she said, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're all going to get together in executive session. We're going to go around the table and we're going to tell him what we think of him. And she goes, what do you think of that? I said, well, hey, I'm cool with that. I come to the city council meetings, the public already does that to me. And so long story short, they go around the table, and for the most part, it was a pretty good review. And so as we were getting ready to leave, Bill Euler took me aside. I don't know if any of you knew Bill. Bill was a funny guy. And he said, oh God, he said, I wouldn't have your job for anything. He said, to sit here and go through that. He said, I don't know. He said, I just wouldn't care about it. He said, I don't know. How do you keep all these people happy? And I said, Bill, all I have to do is keep 5 of you happy. The other 4 I don't really care about. But long story short, I was asked tonight to talk about partnerships and collaboration, but I would tell you that one of the things that you'll appreciate about tonight is your speakers have been pretty brief. And so, they always talk about, don't get long on speeches. So I'll try to be brief as well. There's, when you talk about partnerships and collaboration, this is a good example. There's a collaboration that's brought this together. We've been doing this, how long did we figure out? 20 years, something like that? And really, it was just an idea that came about one day when several of us were sitting around talking about the upcoming election and realizing, as I did, that oftentimes people come into elections for some very good reasons, but they don't really appreciate or understand all the various issues and some of the things that go into that. Obviously, some of you have been longtime advocates in the community and certainly have attended council meetings and have a better understanding of some of those issues than others. But long story short, we said, well, what if we put together a program that shared information before people ran for office, before people made that commitment, or before people got busy with a campaign, so that they'd have a better understanding of the various issues impacting the city. And so it was a collaboration between the city and the county and school district and the chamber. We all came together to do this program. So that's a really good example of collaboration. But public-private partnerships in St. Joseph go back a long, long ways. Our economic development program is a public-private partnership in the community that I think works very well. In fact, just prior to my coming on board back to the chamber, there was a move afoot by many of the business people in town to separate economic development from the chamber and to create a totally private economic development agency. And I had several calls, and I was at Triumph Foods at the time, and I had several calls from some of the business leaders in town. They go, well, what do you think about that? And I said, well, I think that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. I said, how in the world do you do economic development without the city and the county sitting at the table? And I think that's just an example. I mean, in order to make progress, in order to achieve what we want to as a community, we have to work together. It's not just about sitting in some other place making decisions and hope that everybody goes along. It really is important from a collaboration standpoint to work together. And certainly the city and the county saw that many years ago. The health department. Now, a lot of people don't even realize this. The health department in the community has been a partnership between the city and the county for forever, for many years, located down at Patey Hall. And again, a lot of people don't even realize the advantages that brings the public, the efficiencies associated with that, which was recognized many, many years ago. Another one was the Law Enforcement Center. Again, another really good project. I was very impressed when I came to the community to see what the community had done to come together. Very innovative, very forward-thinking, but most importantly for the public, saved you a lot of money. City and the county in the same building, working together, sharing costs. Again, another really good example of partnership and collaboration. So what are some other examples that you might be aware of or maybe not? One of them is our legislative advocacy. Back in the late 1990s, we realized as a community that oftentimes we got overlooked, or worse, legislation would be passed that would affect us and we would have no idea until we get a phone call or a copy of a piece of paper or whatever and say, well, we passed this law. I remember this happened, I think, with our animal shelter. The state legislature had passed a law and it created a big problem for our animal shelter because of how they wrote the language and the size of our community and so on and so forth. And we had no idea. We had no idea. Well, you might say, well, hey, what are your legislators doing? Well, the truth is there's so much going on during the legislative session, you better have an understanding yourself about what's going on there. And so we put a group together to do legislative advocacy in Jeff City. The city is part of that, the county is part of that, the CVB, the chamber is part of that, and several others. And so basically what we do is we hire a lobbyist that works on behalf of the city, of the community in Jeff City. And I think over time it has been a very effective collaboration. And actually one of the models in the state, we still get calls periodically from communities around the state and go, hey, how are you all able to achieve this? How are you all able to get this piece of legislation passed. How are you all able to work with your legislators like you do? Business park development. Business park development is a public-private partnership. And to tell you really how that works, both Mitchell Woods and today Easttown is a partnership in the sense that the public sector puts in the infrastructure, the streets and sewers, and the private sector buys the property and does the financing for that. We wouldn't be able to do business parks in St. Joseph if it were not for that public-private partnership. The Community Alliance, the director here, Steve, is again another collaboration and partnership. This goes back again probably 20 years when we came together as a group to say, you know, we need a forum, we need the ability to be around the table to work on issues, to identify key important issues in this community, to advocate for the community where appropriate. And really that was kind of the underpinning of the Community Alliance. We did surveys, we reached out, talked to people, got feedback, and from that came up with initiatives to move forward, and that's what Steve Johnson does today through the Community Alliance. Another partnership is the Downtown Partnership. The Downtown Partnership has gone through some changes over the years, but let me tell you a little bit of the background of the Downtown Partnership. Back in the late 1990s, mid to late 1990s, you had several different groups downtown, and they were all fighting each other. You had the Merchants Association, you had Main Street, you had 2 or 3 other associations. And I can remember this when I was at the city. And so they'd always come to the city and ask for money. They wanted money to do this, they wanted money to do that. Well, that's fine, you know. I mean, there's some good things to be done downtown. But the reality is that they were fighting for the same money. Or they'd get up and say, well, no, we don't need to do that, we need to do this. And so somebody said, Jesus Christ, can't those people get along downtown? And so what we did is we put everybody around the table. We brought the St. Joseph Chamber, had a downtown office. We had the Merchants Association. And we all came together and said, hey, we need to work for a betterment of downtown. And yes, it has taken time. But, you know, today I think downtown is a much better place as a result of all of us working together. I can tell you we don't all get along all the time. But the one thing that is a common core for all of us is making downtown a better place. And so that collaboration and partnership helps move that forward. Also tonight, after me, and I'll get out of here quickly, you're going to get a treat. You're going to get to hear about Uncommon Character, which is the new community branding initiative. Again, a collaboration of a number of groups that Christy Bailey will tell you about. But what I would leave with you is just how important our ability to work together as a community. You know, there are a lot of places in the United States that, you know, if they get something wrong, no big deal. They got enough money, they got enough people. Well, yeah, we screwed that up. Well, let's move on to something else. But you know, I tell people in St. Joe, we don't have that luxury here. We have limited resources. We have lots to do in this community to make it a better place to live. So we can't make mistakes. We have to work together to be successful, because if we make mistakes, it backs us up. And so I always worry about that. You know, we have to get things right. We have to keep moving forward. And I think the best way to do that is through collaboration and partnerships around the community. You know, thinking about the future, there's several other things that are going to be coming up, probably in your term coming up. One of them is the issue of strategic planning. What can we do as a community? What are the 3 or 4 big issues that we need to focus on in the next 5 to 10 years in this community that we can rally around and really make a difference? Some of the other things from a community standpoint, something's going to happen with the elevated through downtown, I-229. That's going to be a huge issue for this community. It's going to be a game changer in many respects, but there's a real opportunity there. And so the community is going to have to come together through collaboration. Another thing is conference and meeting facilities. I can tell you, as an entity that uses a lot of different meeting facilities around town, that's a big issue. I've got companies in St. Joe that can't find places to have meetings. One of them is American Angus, and they have to go down to Kansas City to get meeting space. Well, quite honestly, that worries me. It worries me because if they're going down there, how long will it be before they think, you know, maybe we ought to just move down there? And so conference facilities, meeting facilities is going to be another big challenge and issue that I think, again, partnership and collaboration are going to be a big part of. You know, I always say when it comes to collaborations and partnerships, we can do a lot more together than we can individually, and I really think that's the name of the game. So again, I appreciate you being here tonight. I appreciate you running for office, and certainly look forward to our next few nights as we talk about issues further. Any questions from anybody? All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, there's Christy. I was wondering if she was here. Okay. As Director of Communications and Marketing for the St. Joseph Chamber of Commerce, Christy Bailey is responsible for the management, development, and design of Chamber both digital and print, internal and external communication. Her work includes brand management, advertising, marketing, and publications. She is responsible for the Chamber's 3 websites and social media platforms and is the media liaison. Before joining the Chamber in 2008, Christy spent 8 years as an award-winning reporter and editor at the St. Joseph News Press. She covered law enforcement and the Buchanan County Courthouse before becoming a city editor. Christy has a Bachelor of Arts degree in English, emphasis in journalism, and a minor in business from Missouri Western State University. She also has a Master of Business Administration degree from Northwest Missouri State University. She's chaired the community branding effort over the last 2 years and will be sharing this exciting new launch for St. Joseph's future. Christy Bailey.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight and for allowing me to sneak in here. So, show of hands, who's seen Uncommon Character and maybe wondered, what is this all about? Anyone? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Well, like it's been previewed a little bit, Made with Uncommon Character is the new community brand, and it's something that really took a community-wide effort to come together. So community branding is really made up of all the entities you see here. City, Missouri Western, Mosaic, the Chamber, the CVB, and the school district. We started meeting about 2 years ago to work on just communications issues. We wanted to talk to each other about what issues are you having with the media? How do you handle social media? What are the best ways? We all have small departments, like I'm a department of one, but how can we work together to improve the communications within all of our departments? So we started coming together to work on those issues, but we found that we really had a bigger issue in St. Joseph. So for me at the Chamber, I talk to businesses all the time about business needs, about trying to attract new businesses to the community. Beth at the CVB, she talks to tourists. Jamel talks to potential students. We all promote St. Joseph, but we all had different messages. And we knew that if we had one core message, we could do a lot better job for all of our residents. But in St. Joseph, we have a perception problem. And when you all are elected, I'm sure you're going to hear about it every single day. All of the complaints, all of the issues that we have. So every day, we are in a town of nearly 80,000 people. Don't mind my shadow here, by the way. We have a city of almost 80,000 people, about 150,000 people in the metro area. Our unemployment is low. Our wages have been going up. We have new careers, opportunities every year that go up, but yet people complain that there are no good jobs here. We live in a city where our downtown has come back like the Royals in the bottom of the ninth. Well, at least they did a couple years ago. Maybe not this year, but we're coming back in downtown, and we're very proud of it. There is live music that goes on in Felix Street Square nearly every weekend night, spring through fall. And when it's too cold for the park, you can go to the Paradox for live music, go into any number of businesses on first Saturdays. You can break out of the panel room, have an oyster or ramen, buy a book and get tipsy at the same time at Brian's establishment at the Tiger's Den. You can play hockey, ride your bike on one of the best trail systems in the state. And if you're 6 or older, you can play mini golf when it's nice outside. But to our vocal residents online or in line in the grocery store, there's nothing to do here. When Mosaic moved 200 jobs into the now fabulous German-American building, or Hilliard decided not to take its jobs to Kansas City and renovate the soon-to-be blighted wire rope facility, we hear, downtown's dead. Nobody wants to go down there anyway. So we say enough already. We're tired of hearing that. We know that there's positive things going on in this community, and we decided that we're not going to let a vocal minority affect the morale of our residents. So we started working with a group, dozens and dozens of creative people in our community to really address this problem. When doing our research, we found that there are a very small number of negative people that are very vocal. There are a small number of people that are very positive, and there's so many people in the middle that like it here okay, but they can't really tell you why. But we knew some people who could. So we looked to our own residents to tell us what our messaging should be. We could have put all of our money together and gone to a Kansas City marketing firm or an Omaha firm to do this project, but we wanted a message that was authentic. And you can't get more authentic than if you use people that live here, work here every day. So we sent out applications throughout the community for talented people in graphic design, web, video, photography, and we narrowed it down to 12 people, and they spent 2 days last summer making a variety of messages. We got it down to 3 messages, and then the group of communications directors, we went out, focus groups, polls, and we tested those. And came back with, Made with Uncommon Character was the one that really rang true. So since that message was made, we've continued to work with these local creative people. And I'd like to show you now one of the, does that need to be turned off? Can you get it? Okay. Okay, let's make sure that the sound's on. So since we've launched, we've continued to work with creative people. The same dozen that started the whole process, but then we've added more. She wants to see the video.
You know our history, made with the curiosity of early explorers and the fearlessness of pioneers heading west to find gold and a better life. Made with the cleverness of business owners and pioneers, never afraid to take a risk. From the very beginning, our local color has been defined by balancing competitive, conflicting, and strong individual ideas with shared goals, common dreams, and high expectation. For 175 years, the people here have been the makers, the innovators, the instigators, the producers, making a difference for each other. We are passionate, quirky, even stubborn in our devotion to our neighbors, our family, and this legendary place we call home. Made with creativity and courage, we enjoy the benefits of learning and living in a place that offers both rural starry nights and colorful city lights. Made with pride in our families and in our teams, in our flavors and in our festivals, in our past and in our present. We have a spark that inspires ideas that are life-changing for our neighbors and man's best friend. Made with grit and spunk, we cultivate leaders and artisans. We are unafraid to stand up and work for what's right. We are a city of creators, made with rhythm, soul, and heart. St. Joseph, original, authentic, and uncommon in the best of ways. Bit by bit, prevailing with spirit through times of challenge and celebration. We have been, and continue to be, a community made with uncommon character.
There you have it. There's how Made with Uncommon Character came to be, and why we really think that it is a message that rings true for our community, because we are uncommon. We have uncommon character in our hearts, in our architecture, in our roots. We're not cookie cutter, and we're proud of it. When people call us at the chamber and they say, okay, I'm taking a job in St. Joe, but should I live in Liberty, Platte City, St. Joe? We say, you need to live in St. Joe because those communities are fine, but they're vanilla, and we are the cherry mash twister, Chris and Kate's. You know, we're different and we're proud of it. It's time we own that and we talk about it. So we have been talking about it. We launched in August and we've been going hard ever since. It's on billboards. We're getting ready. Our first radio commercial comes out on Monday. I'm excited about that. We're online, social media, our website. And merchandise. I already mentioned Brian. He took this picture and posted it on Instagram, so I stole it, using our mug on Election Day. There's our hats. There's our mugs, shirts, our billboard. We really wanted, when we formed this message, we wanted to have a message that people would be proud to wear on their chests. That first day of that design process, we had a lot of really okay ideas, but I kept challenging them to say, is this something you would be proud to wear on your chest? And we finally have it. And about a dozen different t-shirts you can choose from that show it. So here's our website. From a chamber perspective, we're very excited about this because this is really a place where businesses, potential residents, tourists can come to learn about St. Joseph. You can come to our website, live, learn, work, play, and visit, and find everything that you need to know about why St. Joseph is a good choice for you. There's under work, there is a job posting site. So if you're coming here but your spouse needs a job too, you can find a job on our site. We have got descriptions of schools from pre-K through master's degrees, because our communications group as a whole, we knew that we had all this information, but it was scattered at about 7 different sites. We did not make it easy for people to find what they needed to move here. So we put it all in this site. Our stories we're very proud of. This is a place where we are highlighting the uncommon character of our residents that live here. For instance, Bright, the blonde lady there, Connor Hazelrig, she is a former resident. She grew up here. She had an idea. She was doing an internship at Sunshine Sign, and that idea turned into the Sunshine Box, and it powers cell phones to people in underdeveloped countries. An idea born and raised here, supported by one of our companies. But it's not just our people, it's our places. It's our parkway, it's our south side, it's our events. For Saturdays, Alonzo Weston, his story is all about how he started with a very labor-intensive, dangerous job, and how now he's one of the most well-respected columnists in the city. So we have stories of people, places, and things. Our events calendar, our goal with that is for it to be the one place that you can go to find out all the major events in St. Joe. Here at the chamber, we would go to plan an event, and we'd almost basically have to call Kim at the city and say, who has pulled an event permit for this week? Because we don't want to compete with the Fall Festival, or is it the Mo West Northwest game? So this is the one place where all of us have come together. We're committed to filling that calendar so we can all know better what's going on. And you can submit your own events too. So that makes it very user friendly. And then of course we're on social media. Another part of the events calendar is, okay, can you please go back there, please? I didn't mean to have a sidekick, and my husband's at work, sorry. So the events calendar, you can toggle on and off different events that or different areas that, so if you're only interested in family friendly, you can turn on family friendly. If you're only interested in nightlife, you can just turn that on. So we really wanted to make this whole site as user friendly as possible. So, how can you help? You can share the stories. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Suggest a story topic. We're always interested. You all know more people than we do in the community. I'm sure you have someone that needs to be featured, or your favorite place, your favorite business. Share a story subject. You can buy the merchandise, wear it with pride. You can donate to the cause by either buying merchandise or giving at our GoFundMe site. But most importantly, we want you to, when you hear something untrue, something overtly negative about St. Joseph, and you can put a stop to it, please do that. Because we're only going to change our culture if people start speaking up and saying why you choose to live here, why you choose to run for office, what makes you care about this city so much that you're willing to work for it and defend it. That's a very important part of this whole campaign, is showing more of our pride, why we love our city like we do. So I want to end on a positive note. I told you about how we talked and worked with local residents. By the way, everything, all that merchandise that you see, every dollar that we've spent on this campaign, we've raised from local people and local businesses, but every dollar we've spent has been with local businesses because we wanted to put our money where our mouths were and only support St. Joseph businesses. So that's where you see everything here. But we're very excited. I don't know if you've heard this song yet, but Simon Fink with the band Under the Big Oak Tree made an original song for St. Joseph, and Beth Conway from the CVB put together a slideshow that really goes along with Simon's song, and I would like to show that to you. Okay, if you could start the video, or I can start. There's no representation of history.
Look at the sky, look at the ground, look at the faces, look at the town. Are you in love? Are you in love? Are you in love? Look out at the bluffs, that wide rolling river, the way it seems like it goes on forever. Are you in love? Are you in love? Are you in love? Great houses of old, promise yet untold. Old brick peeks up through the blacktop in a whisper. They say it's got character, it's got an edge, if that's something I love. They came here from the east, hoping for home. They harvested the earth, and stone by stone, and made it their home. They struggled and strived, and some people found life. Booms and busts, fires and rain, they hung together in the take grit, it's gonna take sweat, it's gonna take you, me, and everyone we can get. I'll be Ruby, you be Lewis and Clark. I'll meet you way up on Lover's Lane after dark. We'll take the Pony Express, I'll bring the cherry mash. You be Jesse James, I'll be the bag and cash. You be the drummer boy, I'll be the hawk playing sax. You be the tenor, I'll be the saltine crackers. Look at the sky, look at the ground. This is the place where it all went down. Are you in love? Are you in love? Are you in love? Look out over the hills, the river, the roads, the way they twist and twine and bring us home again. They're bringing us home, they're bringing us home, they're bringing us home. Are you in love? 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 Are you in?
That last group picture there, that is the 12 St. Joseph residents that made Uncommon Character. And in the first video I showed, the artist drawing it out, the words Uncommon Character. We didn't want to just pick a font that you could choose out of, Microsoft. He actually, that's local artist Matthew Robertson. He drew that himself. So it's an uncommon font to go with our theme there. So we're very happy about that. So I think hopefully in that video there's something everyone can be proud of. I think we know one of the reasons we chose the word uncommon, and some of the reasons you guys are running for office is because we know there's issues to fix. We know we're a work in progress. We're always going to be. We are uncommon, but there's always something to be proud of, and we have so much of that in St. Joseph. So hope that kind of helps. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. I'm always here, and I can stick around a little bit afterwards too. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, we're going to wrap up tonight with a short video called Ignite. Judy Sabbard has dedicated her entire career, over 30 years, with the Heartland Foundation as president, serving as a catalyst, convener, innovator, and connector. Heartland Foundation is a public charity dedicated to championing education and empowering people to build healthy and thriving communities. Judy, please introduce your 3-minute video and close us out tonight. And to all of you, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next Wednesday, November 8th.
Thank you, Corky, and I promise my intro will be less than 3 minutes. First of all, it's great to see so many of you here. Leadership is so important to our community, and you have made a commitment. You have said you want to lead our community, and I so appreciate that. And it takes working together as a team. It takes people who are willing to serve tirelessly with passion and heart and with open minds. So being here tonight really says a lot about each and every one of you. Steve asked me if I would share this video. This is something the foundation put together for some of the activities we do for forums and a variety of other things. And I think it's a pretty powerful video. But a couple things I want you to think about. When we come together as a nation, as a region, as a community, or even as a small group of people, we can do extraordinary things. We can bring out the best in each other, and we can really leverage the potential of other people. And I think that's what you want to do as you take on this role of leadership within our community. So tonight what I would say is that we want to encourage you to be the spark, to work together, and as that spark, find ways to work together, because when we work together, when we come together, we can do some extraordinary things. So again, I thank you, and I wish you all the very best.
A spark, that small fiery particle. It emits light. It can bring warmth. It can give hope. A spark is visible energy, and it can bring change. A spark is often produced by striking two things together. The same can happen in us when dreams and determination collide. When you strike your dreams with a determined effort, you can spark change. However, single sparks left alone can quickly burn out. They need fuel to survive. They need fuel to grow. This is why being an active part of something bigger, a part of something greater, a part of something that's about more than just ourselves is so important. We are a part of community. It is in our communities our single sparks can become something brighter. For when we share our unique experiences and our dreams, we learn from one another. We begin to explore new ideas. We open ourselves to creating a shared vision for our future to which each of us can contribute and to which all of us can benefit. Working together, we can make our dreams a reality. Together, we can ignite a movement that will bring change. As Jimmy Carter said, each of us must rededicate ourselves to serving the common good. We are a community. Our fates are linked, our futures intertwined. And if we act in that knowledge and in that spirit together, we can move mountains. In our society, a lot is made from perfect endings. A perfect ending can't happen without a beginning. A spark. That small, fiery particle. It is visible energy. It is the start of positive change.